These Earth Week events are brought to you by the Global Studies Program and the Global Studies Club, and supported financially by the Peralta College's Foundation. We also want to thank the Cheese Board for giving us pizza, which we invite you to have at the end, not now, and Kay's Coffee Shop, which is next door to us, which has generously donated 3 big hostels of coffee, also for you to have at the end. We have another event scheduled at 5 o'clock. It's a movie called A Fierce Green Fire. It's the story of the environmental movement, and it's going to be shown in our auditorium right over here at 5 o'clock. So I invite you to come back again for that event as well. So it's with great pleasure that I want to introduce Judy Pope, who's an activist and a coordinator with the Bay Area 350.org. Project. They've been one of the most important activist groups in trying to oppose the Keystone Pipeline, which will be a huge disaster from the standpoint of climate change. I don't know if people have heard of Bill McKibben, but he's been one of the people who spearheaded this organization and that drive, and he spoke at BCC a couple of years ago, and we were really, really happy to have him. And we also have Christy from the Students to Stop Fracking. Fracking is a really hot issue, or a cool issue given how much water it takes in California these days, and there are people activating themselves all over the state to try to prevent fracking from starting, especially in this year of major drought. So they're both going to speak to you, and when they're finished, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers or comments from people in the audience. So Judy is going to start first, and thank you all for coming.
Okay, that's on, right? Oh, good. And I love it. Everybody's sitting in the back. Just so we don't have to shout, do you think you could come a little closer, folks, please? It'd be really nice. Thank you. Fill in the seats. Really, we don't bite. Thank you. I also want to introduce a member of our team, Barbara Stebbins. Why don't you stand up, Barbara? Hi. Barbara is a member of the 350 Bay Area Stop Fracking team, and she's here to help answer questions and make sure you all get the material. Yeah, I'm with 350 Bay Area, which is a sort of a new nonprofit organization that's working in the 9-county Bay Area, and our mission is to build a grassroots movement to force the industry, to force businesses, to force utilities, to force the rapid reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the 9-county Bay Area and beyond. Because one thing that people don't realize about the Bay Area is that we're like a small, rich country as far as how much greenhouse gases we put into the environment. It's kind of like Switzerland or something. You know, we're a big polluter is what it comes down to. So we're working here, but we're also working in California, and we team up with people working all around the country. I wanted to start actually with the good news. There actually is very good news about the climate, especially here in California. So I wanted to find out where you all live. How many of you are from Berkeley, live in Berkeley? Okay. How many of you live in Oakland? Okay. Any other places that you come from? Just shout it out. Hercules. What? Hercules, yeah. Richmond, okay, great. Where? Florida. Wow. I hope, okay, Florida is sinking rapidly. Okay, thanks. Let me get a little bit more information about you. Do any of you have children? Not in this group, okay. Are there places in California that you particularly love, especially natural places, beautiful places that you really love? Just shout them out. Redwoods. Point Reyes, one of mine. What? Mount Tam. Briones. I love Briones. I just went there. The wildflowers are out. Yeah, fantastic. So it's a beautiful state we live in, right? And the Bay Area is beautiful, and we really cherish it. We want to keep it. So one of the pieces of good news is that California is a world leader on fighting climate change and the chaos that climate change is bringing to the planet. In 2006, the legislature passed, and a Republican governor, Schwarzenegger, signed a piece of legislation called AB 32. And AB 32 put strict limits on the amount of greenhouse gases, that is methane and CO2, carbon dioxide, that California would be allowed to put out. And California would have to gradually reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that it put into the atmosphere. This has resulted in a whole bunch of really good developments. So for example, our utilities now have to put much more power into their mix that comes from green, clean energy, like water and wind and solar. Our cars have to get better fuel efficiency. Our buildings have to be better insulated, and our new buildings have to be very green. Businesses are under a cap and trade program, so they reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that they put out. All of these things have resulted in real money savings for California and really has made California a leader in fighting climate change. In fact, scientists from China just came to California to talk to our technological experts in Silicon Valley about how we're doing it. And people come and talk to us about the various programs and policies. So we're a leader. It's really great. At the same time, and people are doing a great job. You know, we've changed our light bulbs. We've bought energy efficient refrigerators. A lot of you young people, bless you, are not getting cars, right? That was a rite of passage when I got out of class in high school to take my driver's test. This was a rite of passage. Now you're biking, you're walking, you're taking mass transit. This is because we've got to get people out of our cars. This is just great. But we know we need to do a lot more. The climate crisis is a real crisis, and it's happening fast, and we have to do a lot more. So let me introduce you to a man named Mark Jacobson. Mark Jacobson is a professor at Stanford. We wish he was at Cal, but he is at Stanford. We're very glad he's doing the work he's doing. He decided in the 1990s, actually, that he needed to figure out what it would take to turn the whole planet green, to make it convert to green energy. He went on to do it for the entire world, for the United States, and he's now doing it for all the different states. What would it take for California to go completely green by 2050, and actually to be very close by 2020 and 2030, which is not that far away? And he crunched the numbers and looked at all the studies and figured out that we could be 100% green using currently available technology. No wishful thinking out there, you know, magic bullets, but stuff we know how to do now, using wind, water, and sunlight, not nuclear and not natural gas, which is a disaster for climate change, natural gas, not a bridge transition, but a disaster. Without using any of those, how we could go completely green. And in fact, we're going to be doing a conference on May 9th where Mark Jacobson is going to be a speaker, and we have that information back there. You really must hear him. It is so hopeful. So we have to, he's given us this path forward, the vision of how we complete this journey toward a green future in California. And we need to spread that word, and we need people to understand that we can do this. What we need is the political will, which is where you folks come in. Now, why is this so important? I like to start with, I think you've probably all seen the pictures of our Earth taken from space. Have you all seen those? Those beautiful, you know, there's that beautiful Earth. And if you look on top of the cloud, usually there's a white cloud layer, and then there's sort of a blue layer. It looks very fragile, and it kind of just fades off into space. And that's our atmosphere. It is our atmosphere that has maintained a balance of hot and cold and gases so that humankind has been able to spread over the planet over the last 100,000 years. It's the thing that enables us to grow food, to grow animals, to have enough water for all of our needs, that atmosphere. And when you look at it, it's very fragile, you know? So when sunlight hits the Earth and bounces off the water or the land, mostly the land because the water is absorbing it. When it bounces off the land, it has been kept in a balance. Now, what have we been doing to that very fragile layer? Since the Industrial Revolution and really jacking up in the 1990s, we have been pouring greenhouse gases from the burning of fossil fuels into our atmosphere. So the fossil fuels are coal, oil, and gas. And the greenhouse gases that they emit as they burn, the ones that are so bad, are carbon dioxide and methane. And there's also a third, which is sort of large particles or soot, which places like China are emitting in huge quantities. These are getting trapped, as these accumulate in our atmosphere, and when the sunlight comes into the atmosphere, instead of bouncing off the Earth and being released back into space, they're getting trapped. That's the greenhouse effect. That's that blanket that's happening to us. So instead of being a warm, comfortable blanket that makes life pleasant for us, it's becoming a suffocating layer. And because of that, our planet is warming, and because of the warming, we are getting a lot of really bad effects. Does any of you know some of the effects that are happening? Melting of ice? What else? Yeah? Yeah? Say it again. Right. Anything else? Yep, we're losing the species. Drought in California. What we call extreme weather events are happening all over the planet. So Superstorm Sandy, right? There are going to be more of those. The Rim Fire. You all love Yosemite. Have you ever been to Yosemite? The Rim Fire was one of the hottest, fastest, and biggest ever to hit in California, and we're told we're going to expect more of those. And then there's the drought. There was a water manager quoted in the paper about the current drought in California, and he said on a scale of 1 to 10, this drought is a 14. So it's come home to California. These extreme weather events are coming home. And of course, we have to remember that the places and people that are going to be hit the hardest first are the people who can least deal with the consequences of climate change. So people, low-income people, people in developing countries, people who are already struggling to buy food. The price of food is going to soar in the country this summer because California produces about 40% of all the fruits, nuts, and vegetables that people eat in the United States. And because of the drought, the prices may go up 30%. So people who are already having trouble paying their grocery bills are going to have even more trouble. Then there are the communities that live in the places where these dirty fuels are produced. So there's a real economic justice, and I know you're all attuned to this because I saw it all around the room, this wonderful work. So climate change is going to hit us all, it's hitting us all, but it's going to hit the people who can deal with it the least, hardest, and first. So that's the greenhouse effect, and because of what's happening, climate scientists tell us that we, in order to avoid absolute catastrophe, and I do mean absolute catastrophe, we have to keep 80% of all the coal, oil, and gas that's still in the ground in the ground. We can't burn it. We can't mine it, we can't drill it, we can't refine it. It has to stay in the ground. And instead, we have to do what Mark Jacobson is telling us we have to do, push ahead with wind and water and sun. So solar on rooftops, solar farms, all kinds of solar, geothermal energy, and wind. Wind farms, smaller installations, wind of all kinds. California is blessed with enough of this that we can make that shift. We have to do this very fast, and we have to keep that 80% in the ground. Now, you can just kind of imagine how the fossil fuel industry, the most powerful industry in the world, reacts to the idea that they have to keep that stuff in the ground, because that's what their profits are based on. It's not based on, the value of their stocks is not based on what they're drilling. It's what's in the ground. And we've got to tell you this has to stay in the ground. Now, there's some real threats, and that's where we get to Keystone and fracking and things like that. Keystone is a pipeline which will carry oil that is taken out of this horrible processed tar sands in Canada will carry it across the border, down through the United States and to the Gulf of Mexico to be refined and probably mostly shipped to other countries, China, India. They'll be the beneficiaries. In the process of mining this stuff up in Canada, it's a horrible process. If you go online and look at what they do to the land, it just scrapes, it's like a rape of the landscape. And this is the area of very rare and valuable arboreal forests. Forests which, by the way, where the trees are taking carbon out of the air. So trees are very valuable and we need to protect them. This just, flattens that, gets the oil out of the tar sands, pollutes the water, uses tons of fresh water, pollutes it beyond recovery. It can never be cleaned up. It can never be used for anything else. That water gets into the wells, the drinking source, the source for animals and plants. The native peoples of that area are showing higher rates of cancer and other terrible diseases because of that stuff that's going on. So there's a big movement in this country and in Canada to stop the pipeline from being completed. The President Obama, he has the power to do that because it crosses an international boundary. So he can stop it. He can make it impossible for the tar sands to be shipped by pipeline from Canada down through the United States. And I don't know if any of you saw this, but just recently, Obama announced that he would not be making a decision on Keystone right away. We had thought it might come in a month and a half. Many of us are not surprised, though, because that decision would piss off a whole bunch of people one way or another. To either piss off the Canadians who want, the Canadian government, not the people of Canada, but the government, and the oil industry, of course, or he'd piss off the environmentalists who have been getting arrested and coming out in huge numbers to oppose the pipeline. So he just announced a delay, and it's pretty much going to be a delay until after the midterm elections. So that's where we are with Keystone. Keystone has been a great rallying for people who want to stop dirty energy and want to move to clean energy. It's that people have gotten involved by the hundreds of thousands around the country around Keystone. And if you ever go to a Keystone rally, it's very much fun. It's very encouraging. So Keystone, we have to stop that. But we have to do a lot more. In California, there is a particular threat under the sort of general topic of fracking. California has this thing called the Monterey Shale, which is a rock formation that holds a lot of oil. It goes right down the coast and the center of California. In fact, it goes right down the San Andreas earthquake fault. And it's really, it's mostly concentrated in what we call the breadbasket of California, where we grow all of those fruits, nuts, and vegetables. It's also offshore Santa Barbara. The oil companies are looking at California as the next Saudi Arabia. They look at us and they just have dollar signs in their eyes. Oh boy, we can get like 15 billion barrels of this oil out and sell it, and we're getting richer than we are even now, which is obscenely rich. So the problem with that is, well, there are a number of problems. One is that it uses a lot of water. It's fracking for oil, not gas. You might have heard about fracking in the rest of the country. It's mostly for gas in the rest of the country. In California, it's for oil. And it's oil, some of the worst oil for the climate that exists on the planet. Really heavy in carbon dioxide. Releases a lot of methane. Bad, bad stuff. So the oil companies want to drill, this process of getting it out is either fracking or another kind of what they call extreme extraction, which is a term I love because it sounds like something a nasty dentist would do to you. So I like to talk about extreme extraction. They also talk about well stimulation, which is a little bit, sensual or something, but no. Let's talk about extreme extraction, because that's what it is. It's just wrenching this stuff out of the ground. They do it either by putting water with chemicals and sand at high pressure, just pushing it down the well hole and breaking up the rock and extracting it. Or what they're more likely to do in California, because we have very complicated rock in California, is that they're going to push hydrofluoric acid down these pipelines into the earth and melt the rock and bring out the oil. Hydrofluoric acid is an extremely dangerous industrial acid, one of the most dangerous. The idea that they'll be trucking or carrying this around the state is really terrifying. Huge problems for health, uses lots of water, makes the water toxic and dirty and can never be used again. And then what happens with this water? Well, they can store it underground, but it leaks into wells, and people in the Central Valley are already finding that that's happening in places where they're starting to do this. It leaks into the wells. The process puts pollution into the air. And it takes a lot of water that our farms need. So already there are signs that the farmers are in a losing battle with the oil companies over that water. They're going to lose that battle because they can't pay as much as the oil companies can. But the other thing about fracking is that fracking takes that stuff out of the ground. Remember that 80% that has to stay in the ground, the 80% of the coal, oil, and gas? It has to stay there. We can't use it. If we use it and burn it, we will be putting, it's been figured, we will be putting as much more greenhouse gas into the environment as the entire car population of LA, the city of LA. It's a huge amount that we will be adding to the atmosphere if we frack. Oh, I forgot one other fun thing about fracking or extreme extraction. It causes earthquakes. It caused earthquakes in Oklahoma, caused earthquakes in Ohio, places that have never really recorded earthquakes before. Now think of that happening on the San Andreas Fault. So there's so many reasons we have to stop fracking, and there's a huge movement growing to stop it, both at the state level with local ordinances and with students. And Christy will talk to you more about that. So we have to stop fracking extreme extraction. The last thing is that because of all of this mining and drilling and transport that's going on, the Bay Area is actually seeing more dirty energy moving through it and in it. So oil companies are building storage facilities, they're building rail lines, they're expanding their refining capacity of this dirty oil that's coming through California. I'll tell you, this is very much at home. Somebody was reading an environmental impact report by Phillips 66, which is an oil company, and it happened to mention in that report that one plan they have is to ship oil, really dirty oil, by rail to a site off the coast of San Luis Obispo for refining. And then they're going to ship it on the Amtrak rail line. Do you know where the Amtrak rail line runs? Here, Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, Hayward. They want to ship this stuff, which is more flammable than gasoline, by rail, through our towns, through our cities. This stuff, a tanker rail train line of this, tipped over in a town in Quebec, and 47 people died in the explosion, and it flattened the town. This stuff is more explosive than gasoline. And this is what they want to send through our towns and cities. And this is what they want to refine in places like Richmond and Benicia and Pittsburgh, all along. And you who are living in Hercules, that's the ground zero, that's close to ground zero for some of this stuff. So we have a whole bunch of people getting active and organizing with these communities to stop the expansion of these refineries, to stop the rail lines, to stop the storage facilities. We need help with that, so you can join us with that. So that's what we're working on. We're working for Mark Jacobson's vision. We're working against everything that continues, the pressures that continue to bring this stuff out of the ground, coal, oil, and gas, particularly in California oil. We're fighting that in many ways and on many, many fronts. And I would like to now bring Christy up to tell you what she and the other students on Stop Fracking are doing. Maybe it'll give you some ideas, and then I'll tell you some of the other stuff we're doing.
Hi everyone, I'm Christy. I attend UC Berkeley, and I'm part of Students Against Fracking. We started our organization at the beginning of this semester, and we're essentially trying to fight fracking in California. Something that Judy brought up was that although the propaganda surrounding fracking is that it is this bridge fuel to renewable energy, essentially the fact of the matter is we are using fracking in California to extract oil, and it's going to be exported, so it's not even like we're using it for our own domestic energy use. And beyond that, although people are saying, well, what if we regulate it? Like, that'll be fine. We trust the engineers. We trust everyone that's doing this. But if you look at the details of the regulatory agencies like Dogger, who is supposed to be regulating these practices, you find out that a lot of these officials are funded by the oil and gas industry when they got elected. And so essentially it's called regulatory capture, where the oil and gas industry is essentially controlling how their practice is regulated, and clearly it's going to be not regulated properly, and it threatens our air, our groundwater, and essentially our choices as citizens to choose what our future is going to look like for future generations, and it's terrible. So students at UC Berkeley, as well as at UC Santa Barbara, some of the Cal States across California have all mobilized and are starting to form a statewide coalition of students pushing for a ban on fracking. We want to place pressure on Governor Jerry Brown specifically because he has the opportunity to turn this thing around and place a moratorium on fracking until real science is conducted on the consequences of this practice, because essentially the science behind it, although people are like, oh, what facts or what science do you have to back up your claims that fracking is actually bad? Well, all of the science that could be, present to the public has been pretty much hidden and bought off by oil and gas companies, if you really do your research. And so placing a moratorium on fracking will essentially stop oil and gas extraction through the practice of fracking and acidizing, as was also mentioned, breaking up shale rock through toxic chemicals, and will force these companies to actually disclose more of the chemicals that they're actually using in the practice, as well as allowing citizens to make informed decisions about voting against fracking and giving them the opportunity to control this practice. And so as students, I would love to form a coalition with Berkeley City College, get all of you involved, start discussing ideas on how to really fight this. At the table in the back, I placed some petitions. You all can sign it. We are going to be delivering a bunch of the petitions next month. And we just want to lobby and pressure our government officials to really respect that the students are not going to stand for this, and we are not complacent, and I would love to unite with all of you. We also have flyers on the back to like us on Facebook, connect with us, network, and it's up to us to really stop this too. So I really hope you all identify with that and take action. Thank you.
Yeah, Christy really, thanks Christy, because she really put her finger on it. The point that we're at with this fight is that we have to ratchet it up. We have to do more. As individuals, we've done a lot, but it's now time for collective action. It's time for collective action in the legislature. It's time for collective action at the local level. It's time to hit the streets. I mean, we really have to ratchet this up. So 350 Bay Area is working in all these different areas. We're working on legislation to get a moratorium on extreme extraction in California while they study the issue. If they do an honest study, they're going to decide that can't be done in California. So we've got to get that to happen. Various cities and counties are looking to put the bans or moratoriums on fracking or extreme extraction. In fact, the city of Beverly Hills, and there is extreme extraction going on in Los Angeles, right there in Los Angeles. The city of Beverly Hills was the first, just announced, they just passed a ban on fracking within their city limits. We're looking at doing one in Alameda County. There may be a little bit of extreme extraction in Alameda County. The Monterey Shale comes up into our county. LA, Santa Barbara, a whole bunch of places are looking for it. So we're working at that. We're doing this conference, this amazing conference, May 9th through 11th, with Mark Jacobson on Friday night, and then Saturday, all kinds of information about what's happening in the Bay Area with all this refining and transport. And on Sunday, we're doing organizer workshops, how to get involved, how to get active. So please think about joining us. I know you're students, I know you're really busy, but we need this young energy to come in, and we have a special low rate on tickets for students. What else are we doing? We do organize all the time around Keystone XL Pipeline. We're working on divestment to get colleges and universities to get their money out of fossil fuel stocks. which is one of the things that's going on in the UC system. Peralta community colleges did that. You should applaud your community colleges because they took that stand and they've divested. So that's another thing we're working on. We're working on strengthening good climate action plans around the Bay Area, just lots and lots of things. We are starting an East Bay chapter. We have these local groups all around the Bay Area. We have one in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Marin. We want to start one in the East Bay, and there's a meeting this Saturday from 10 to 12 at 350.org offices in downtown Oakland. If you're interested in finding out what more you can do around in the East Bay with other people in the East Bay, please think of coming to that meeting. They're fun meetings, really great people, and we have a lot of fun stuff starting up. Okay, so I would like to stop now and let's take questions and discussion. And I understand, let's see, you're going to handle this, right?
Mic up to you. I'm pretty sure that mic's also working. So we have a video up in the back that's being recorded, so people need to speak to the mic so that we can be heard. So raise your hand if you have any question or a comment, something that you're thinking about, something that's really pressing for you that you want to bring up to this crowd.
Yeah, Christy, why don't you come up and join me up here? You can.
Sorry, I'm not too good at public speaking. You'll have to forgive my voice. Is anything being done by your group to petition President Obama to put the permissible level of radiation in the water from the Fukushima accident back to its placement before he met, I believe, back 2 weeks ago?
So it was recorded, right? I don't have to repeat it. Okay. We are not specifically working on the fallout from the Fukushima accident. I know other groups are working on that, but I'll tell you one thing. We are not supportive of nuclear energy as a way to try to deal with climate change in the United States. There are people, unfortunately some scientists have turned to nuclear energy. It's feeling the situation is so desperate. But when you look at what Mark Jacobson is proposing, we don't need nuclear energy. We can do it with wind, water, and sun. So we're very definitely turned away from the nuclear path as a way to deal with climate change.
It seems like the way to sort of defeat, I guess, big oil companies is taking the power away from like campaign financing, and it seems like we're going the other way. It seems like it's getting worse. So how do you see this panning out in the future? Like how are we going to defeat the big oil companies? How are we going to convince the oil companies to convert into wind, solar, and...
Yeah, I know. Like the rest of you, I watch these Supreme Court decisions and I think, oh my God, we're just screwed. I don't really know how we're going to get the money out of politics, because it's such a terrible situation. And I really applaud the people who are working on that, although we're not working on it directly. I think what we have going for us in a kind of an ironic way is the extreme weather events that are happening are now bringing climate change home to people for whom it was just kind of a distant thing. It was in some island that's drowning in the Pacific, or it's something, pollution in China or something, but it's not really going to affect my life, and I have other things to worry about. Things like the drought in California, Superstorm Sandy. People are feeling it in their own daily lives, and as they're feeling it, you can see it in the polls. The concern is rising. The media is getting more honest in their coverage. They could hardly be less honest than they have been during the last couple of decades. So they're getting more honest about it, and people's concern is rising, and they're beginning to demand action. And I really believe that demand is going to grow to the point where even the power of the oil industry is not going to be able to stop it. But that's why we have to get out and get mobilized, and our numbers have to grow hugely, because that's what we have, is people power. Do you want to say anything about that? You don't have to, but... Okay.
I'll hold off.
I'm going to see if anybody else has a question, just to make sure that everybody gets a chance.
So I have a question about the public transportation. Mainly about how how can an everyday individual like a student or a minimum wage worker reduce their use of refined oils and things like this, and after the methods are provided, how can institutions such as 350 Bay Area or like state institutions help pressure these individuals daily to continue this lifestyle, such as like provide more bike lanes or things like this?
Right. It's an excellent question because transportation, I mean, where we put, these transportation and housing really affect how much greenhouse gas we're going to put out, because transportation is one of the big drivers of greenhouse gas emissions, definitely. Well, there's a project we're working on that gets a little bit nerdy, if you'll bear with me. There's a project called BayCap. And BayCap deals with the, you're going to love this, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, which we'll call the Air Board for short. This is an agency that regulates the emissions and pollution put out by everything that does not move in the 9-county Bay Area. So it doesn't regulate cars or trains, but it does regulate everything from your local dry cleaner to Chevron. And we, last year, sort of under the radar, got them to pass a resolution which said that for the first time, they would include greenhouse gas emissions when they decided what was polluting behavior by any of these sources. Before, they had done it sort of on the basis of, particulate matter or, direct health and safety. Now they're going to have to take greenhouse gases into account. This is huge. I mean, it really means that this agency, it can go even further than the state in forcing Chevron to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, other businesses, dry cleaners, just a whole range. That's not directly transportation, but that same kind of thing, we're starting to deal with it with transportation, because there are agencies in the Bay Area that regulate transportation, and they have not taken greenhouse gas emissions. It's not been part of their planning, but we're going to force them to do it. And we're going to force it with the same kind of process that we're using with BayCap and the Air Board. So we're going to be looking at all this together. Housing, where we put housing, do we put it close to mass transit, or do we force people to drive, to get from their houses to their workplaces? Are we going to beef up mass transit? Are we going to make biking easier and more secure? Are we going to make it easier for people to live close to their jobs? All of these things. So BayCap is like this BayCap thing is like a first step with the Air Board. And as a result of that decision, every city in the 9-county Bay Area, every county government, every school district, all these different jurisdictions have to come up with climate plans which say how they're going to reduce their emissions. And our job now is to hold the Air Board's feet to the fire so they make sure this happens fast and well. And this is the same kind of process we're going to do with transportation. So that's nerdy, that's regulatory, it's government, but you know what? Government, as much as we can hate it, government is the main tool we have in this battle against climate change. It's what we have. It's the expression of our will. It's the thing that although it's, as Christy said, the influence of industry and the fossil fuel industry is way too strong, there's still the chance that we can wrench it to do the people's will and to work for our common good. We don't have anything else that can do that. So we got to keep our eye on government.
Anybody else? Another question? Back there?
You're talking about reduction of emissions in gas. And once upon a time in California, there was a great public transportation system. You could take a trolley from San Francisco to Chico. Then came Chevron.
Yeah.
Then came Shell. And they bought out the bus companies. They bought out all the mass transportation companies. And then they shut them down, which put everybody else in cars. That's why in California, you need the cars. In the East Coast, you can go from Hartford, Connecticut, down to the city on mass transit. But when you talk about reversing that, you're talking about going up against the most powerful establishment in this country, the oil companies. What is your strategy? What leverage did you have, and how do you plan to employ that?
Well, by ourselves, I mean, 350 Bay Area, we're just one organization. Stop Fracking is just one organization. What we have going for us is a national and an international movement of millions of people who are beginning to say louder and louder, we cannot keep doing this. And it is beginning to make a difference, and I'll just give you one example. And you're quite right, you know. At one point, you were able to take a ferry from San Francisco to Berkeley, and then you could get on a trolley, and then you could get on a funicular up the Berkeley Hills. Can you imagine that, up a funicular? That was Marin. Up a funicular, up the hills. We have lost a lot of that. Some of it is coming back, a lot of it under the pressure of climate change. I understand that LA, downtown LA, is now becoming something of a walking area, which would have seemed impossible to me in earlier years, but it is changing. The power of the fossil fuel industry is so huge, but so is the power of the people when they get aroused. And we have some really unexpected allies. So in this divestment fight, you know, I told you Peralta had divested from fossil fuels. It's amazing what's happening. This started out sort of as a symbolic fight to take away any kind of moral authority of the fossil fuel industry. They don't have a lot. People don't love them. But just to show clearly that they didn't care at all what happened to any of the rest of us on the planet. But what's happened is that as it's become clear that we have to keep 80% on the ground, and as it's become clear that governments are going to have to regulate and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and as this stuff that the fossil fuel industry has that's in the ground, it begins to seem like maybe they won't be able to take it out of the ground, the value of their stocks looks a little bit shakier. These are now being called stranded assets. This oil in the ground, the gas in the ground, the coal in the ground. Stranded assets, very financial term. Not our term, but terms given by the World Bank, the Deutsche Bank, big insurance companies. These huge financial groups are now looking at this and saying, this doesn't look so good. I think you UC Berkeley, or you CalPERS, or you whoever, you better think about getting some of your money out of that. It's not a safe place for it to be. These things can tip over very quickly. So that's what's going to happen. We just have to keep fighting and know that we're not alone in this, and that the more of us that get into it, the faster we can, and the more effectively we can tackle this huge power. And it's going to have to be something like, after the Great Depression, it's going to have to be something like the emancipation of the slaves. It's just going to have to be that big, but that's what we have to do. So we're trying to do it. Oh, absolutely.
In regards to your question too, I would definitely say with regards to even the fracking movement, I mean, it's moved beyond just being environmentalists or just some small population doing it. We have moms against fracking, grandmothers against fracking, doctors, farmers, engineers against fracking, all these different coalitions coming together and making everyone realize that this isn't just some environmental hippies, who, are pissed off. It's like beyond that. It's going to affect everyone, no matter what your socioeconomic class is, no matter what race you are. It affects all of us. And I think because these issues are truly universal, I think it's unique in that it does build these coalitions and makes everyone recognize that we have to come together, or these oil and gas companies really are going to harm our air, harm our water, and our futures.
Anybody else have a question? Did you?
In conjunction with the previous question asked, things have obviously gotten better, but who is at fault for the lack of public transportation? Is it the city planning groups, or is it the civic engineers?
Oh, I'm not a transit expert. Barbara, do you have any wisdom on that? You need the mic.
I personally really think it's the oil and gas companies who are at fault, because they're the ones that destroyed the public transit system that was in place. As the man back there was talking about, I mean, there was did hear everybody say this, a trolley across the Bay Bridge. And they ran it slower and slower. The oil companies bought the trolley and ran it so slowly that it didn't work. Think about what's happening now with AC transit. Why don't more people take it? It's really slow. It's unpredictable. The routes, they keep cutting down the routes, right? So that there aren't enough for it to be convenient to people. So why is that happening? Well, who controls where the money goes? You know, ultimately it's the same answer probably, to my mind. Well, look at who funds elections. So
I wouldn't say the engineers are on the take. I think they have a lot invested in the current system that we have. You know, the infrastructure has been built a certain way. The sprawl has been allowed to happen. They have to get people in Contra Costa. They have to get around somehow because unfortunately we allowed this huge sprawl to happen. So it's systemic, I think, more at least in the public sector than it's a matter of anybody being on the take. And these systems respond slowly because they're big bureaucracies. So we have to push. It is happening. I mean, it is happening. The greater welcoming of the bicycle, for example. I mean, it's a really hopeful sign. The fact that LA is being more walkable and putting in more mass transit, it's amazing. If you were in LA 20 years ago, you would have said never. That would never happen. In the smog, it would have been there.
Anybody have another question, a comment? Anybody that's over there?
Hello.
Hi.
So the man that just left right now, he mentioned that the companies bought off all the public transportation, and that's why we have so many cars now, right? And I had no idea that that's how it occurred. But given that, like, all I know is the current system, I really do enjoy, like, having my car and being able to just jump on it and go. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, couldn't we envision a world where we have great public transportation, but we also have, like, cars? Mm-hmm. And so that leads me to a question: what are the companies that produce energy for us, that, you know, to run our cars or whatever? Are they doing anything to come up with alternative ways to, like, you know, like biofuels? So, you know, because it seems that it would be in their best interest to figure out ways to get energy where they're not pissing off people and they're not destroying the planet.
Right.
You know, so what are they doing? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's an excellent question. Actually, if you look at Mark Jacobson's plan, and I keep going back to him because it's not this pie-in-the-sky plan. It's 55 pages of very fine-grained analysis. He has people are still in their cars, but they're in electric cars. And the electric car industry is growing fast. It has battery challenges that technologists are working on as hard as they can because they can see this is the future. Even the car industry can see that this is the future. So the way the Jacobson plan works, if you think about it, what's the problem with cars? One of the main problems is that they run on fossil fuels. What if we could get them to run on electricity, and that electricity is all created by wind, water, and solar? Take oil and gas and coal out of the equation. So you electrify everything and you make the source of the electricity green. That's basically how it would work. We have obstacles in the way, not only the oil companies and the gas companies, the utilities. The utilities in California, again, it's a systems thing. They created their grids in the 50s. They've got all their money sunk into a certain system that doesn't work for us anymore. We really have to push and fight and work to get solar on people's roofs and more locally generated energy. There's some really great projects that work on that. And we have to push ahead with that. But it's not like they're not going to be cars. It's cars that are going to be run on energy that's clean, electrical energy that's clean, and also that more people will have the opportunity to not get in their car all the time, but to walk, to bike, to use mass transit.
So I think we have time for one more question. If anybody has anything that they're pressing to want to know, or, okay, there we go.
Hey, I have a quick question. So AC Transit, they have about maybe 14 fuel cell buses that run on hydrogen, and I think It's like, I think they run on hydrogen and electricity. What do you think about that?
Oh, wow. Is anybody here I'm not an engineer at all.
Yeah, I mean, for those of us who like to be in a car and go long distance rather than driving in the city, hydrogen fuel cells will be a good alternative. And passenger hydrogen fuel cell cars are due to come out this year. The problem is there's no infrastructure right now for them, so you can't refill. But once we get that infrastructure, the refill time is also nil. I mean, it's not like when you want to recharge an electric car, it takes at least half an hour longer. So when you want to recharge a hydrogen fuel cell car, zip, you can do it and you're on the road again. It begs the question of what will happen when there are too many hydrogen fuel cell cars on the road,
Right. Right. There is one issue about cars that we haven't addressed, which is in the service of the automobile, we have paved over a large part of the planet. And actually, we need to unpave large parts of the planet in order to let the water be able to get into the soil. So that is a problem with encouraging, especially individual car use. But electric cars, definitely the way to go.
Okay, and I think we have one last short question back here.
Hello.
Hi.
My friend told me that if humans didn't burn all the oil and breathe all the oxygen, the earth would blow up. Is that something that could happen?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we can end today. Thank you so much to our speakers for joining us today. Please give them a hand.
Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.
And if you want information, please, before you guys go, if you want information for everything that they just talked about, there's information in that back table. There's also the petition that they mentioned. Also, I have a couple of announcements. We also have food and coffee for people that stayed. Thank you so much for participating. We also have a sign-up sheet here for the geography students that were looking for a sign-up sheet. Just look for Kathy, and she'll help you sign up for that. And one last thing before everybody leaves, we have a member of the GSA club that's going to be talking about a very important petition that they're running.
Hi, thanks for everyone's time. I'll be super quick so that you can get to class. My name is Erin Armstrong, and I'm an officer at the Gay Straight Alliance here on school. We have a petition that we are trying to get signed. The Peralta district has agreed to pay an organization called Partners in Leadership, whose faculty members and leadership has donated to the Prop 8 campaign to the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars. And so we would like them to not come here and focus on culture change at the Peralta district. So if you're a supporter of the LGBT community and if you don't want an anti-LGBT environment here on campus, then we encourage you to come and sign the petition. We're going to be right in the back here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Kay's, and thank you, Cheeseboard Pizza, for your donation. Thank you, everybody, for coming.